Another thing is, don't try to change anyone, right? If someone is toxic, they're likely not going to change overnight. All right, fam, we are here. Welcome back to the channel. I am happy to share with you another video brought to you by a very loyal Instagram follower. Thank you to all of you folks out there. They've asked to remain anonymous today simply because of the topic that we're going to be discussed, which is a little heavier, which is totally fine. But I'm glad you asked, man. A lot of times people don't want to ask the heavy questions, right? And so here is the question. The question is, how do I cut toxic people / family out of my life? Right? A great subject to talk about, and I'm going to try and bring some logic into it, because what I found is that when I can bring logic into something, it really helps me to understand it better, and then therefore implement and deal with it, and add it into my life as something that I can actually take action on. So let's jump into it. So the reason I understand and I've seen that breaking toxic relationships can be difficult is multi-layered. There's many parts to it that really kind of cramp us into space, right? Like we just don't want to do it, don't want to go there, because it's a little painful, it's a little irritating, it's a little sad. Like it's all these layers, right? There's really 3 reasons why it can be difficult to break toxic relationship. First thing is the pain that's coming from it, the hurt. You can't see it with your eyes. It's usually some type of emotional or mental pain that you have from this toxic person. So you can't see it with your eyes, like how you can see a cut like on your arm. And so it becomes very hard to deal with. That's the first reason. Number 2, the second reason is many of us lack the awareness to realize that we are in a toxic relationship. On top of that, the people who are being toxic to us, right? They definitely lack awareness. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that, right? And so go back to my YouTube videos earlier this month, right? Which I have like 2 or 3 that I talk about self-awareness, and it's kind of woven into a lot of the things that I talk about, because I am an advocate for self-awareness. But that's one layer on why it can be difficult, because maybe you don't have the self-awareness, or you're starting to come to it, and the other person doesn't have it either. Now, the last thing is kind of a little shan spin, and I'm sure there's some science behind this at some point. But the last thing on why it's so difficult is a generational thing. We have been taught, especially women, we've been taught to be sacrificial, right? To give up things for others, to put others first. I'm sure you've heard that before. I've done that before. I've been the mom who does that. I've been the daughter who does that. I've been the woman who does that. Always putting other people first, right? So the reason it becomes very hard to break off toxic relationships with people who are toxic in your life is because we are programmed to put others first and to think about their feelings and not think about ours. So then it becomes very hard for us to take the steps to cut them out, because we are so sacrificial that we would rather make everyone else comfortable except for ourselves. So think about that. So like, what are toxic situations? Many of us have come from families who have toxic behaviors. Not saying they're toxic people, they're toxic behaviors. And then there's some of us who are a level up who definitely have toxic people. And then a level above that, it's just, everyone's toxic, and just that it's a crazy environment of toxicity, right? So we all have different levels of it, right? And speaking for myself, I was going to share this at the end. I feel like it's just good to share it right now. Speaking for myself, it was one of the hardest chapters to write in my book that's coming out this year. It's called Evicted at 8. And the section where I talk about bullying, I titled it bullying, but really came down to just toxicity, like how I was being in my own family with me, my husband, and my children, how I was treating them, whether it was unrealistic expectations that I had of them, whether it was something like taking care of their younger siblings, or even something like cooking dinner. Right? I mean, for a young kid who's like 5 or 6, I'm like, yeah, I'll go make your own sandwich. Just because they can doesn't mean they should, y'all. Okay? Ask Shan how many times I made my 5 or 6-year-old do that kind of stuff for them. Like the reason I talk about this is because I can look back on past Shan, right? Younger Shan who didn't know as much, who was very much not self-aware, and see all these toxic behaviors that I exuded onto my children. It is a freaking miracle that they have turned out as grounded as they have, or as even keeled as they have, right? They teach me so much. But with some of the behaviors that I exemplified towards them, it was just downright toxic. And so now I can take ownership of it. And one of the best ways that I take ownership of it is changing those behaviors. And so I can only do that for myself. Now, your question is, how do I cut myself off from those who haven't done that? We're going to talk a little bit about how you can do that, recognize it, and make a plan basically to exit, because in the end, you can't control them, but you can control yourself. Deciding beforehand what subjects you will and will not talk to your family, these certain family members or people about. Decide that in your head. And when they come up, try to change the subject. If the subject doesn't change, then just overtly say, you know what, that's not something I want to talk about. It has to be as simple as that. Why are you being that way? Why you have to be hard for it? We just want to talk, right? We just want to get through this. They start wrapping it up in love and these feelings like, we're only doing this because we love you. Right there. Those are all signs of manipulation. And here's the thing. They may not even realize that they're manipulating. This is just a behavior that they've learned, that they've been using, and that they're passing on to you. But you're the one who's finally stepping up and saying, no, I ain't going to allow that behavior to happen towards me, right? So deciding ahead of time is a really important thing. Another thing is, if they ask you a provoking or prying question that you don't want to answer, don't answer the question with an answer. Answer the question with a question, right? Almost like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Like, is there a reason why you're asking me that? Is that important? Does that help us come to the outcome and what this discussion is about right now? Not because you're looking for a back and forth fight, not because you're trying to be difficult. You're trying to draw your boundaries, and we're going to talk about that shortly. Another thing is, when you're having discussions with these people who are toxic, decide what you're going to share and what you're going to keep private, right? Especially with people who are toxic, you probably are going to want to share a little less, right? You're not going to want to be a complete open book with them, because these people will use that shit against you and to manipulate you and to gaslight you. And if you don't know what gaslighting is, go Google it. It's a great word to use and to know when it's happening to you, because it happens a lot in a lot of relationships that I see. So make sure you Google gaslight. In fact, I might just go ahead and put the gaslight definition on the bottom of the screen as we're talking now. Here's another thing. Here's a simple one. Learn when to say no. Set your boundaries, right? It doesn't always have to be that we get together. If getting together, let's say your family gets together every Tuesday night, right? For dinner. It's a family dinner. Everybody's adults. Everybody comes home. Everybody has dinner. And there was a falling out recently, right? And, it's Tuesday night, right? Or even Tuesday morning, and mom's calling, and let's say mom's a toxic person. I can just say that because I'm the mom, right? So not the mom, but a mom, right? So, and so I'm calling, like, hey, just making sure we're going to see you tonight, talking as if nothing just happened this past weekend with, this huge fallout. You at that moment have to say, you know what? We're still not quite good with what happened this weekend. So we're going to skip dinner this week. And, if we can talk between now and next week, then maybe we'll come back next week. As mom, I might be like, what are you talking about? We have this. This is tradition. This is what we do. You just have to hold that boundary and just have to say something along the lines of like, I understand that. I respect that. I love that tradition. But this week, tonight, we're not feeling it. And we're just simply not going to come. So thank you for checking in on me. But maybe we'll see you next week. And it has to just be that. You don't even have to give them an explanation. That was a lot more explanation than they deserved, especially if they caused the rift that happened. But you need to be able to set your boundaries and to be able to allot yourself the space that you need to process the things that you're thinking and feeling and be able to deal with, because you're the only one who sleeps with your own brain and mind and heart and thoughts at night, not them. So you need to give yourself the time and space in order to process that. And if that means one more week of not seeing them at family dinners, then that's what it motherfucking means, right? They just have to learn how to deal with it. Another thing is, don't try to change anyone, right? If someone is toxic, they're likely not going to change overnight. Ask my kids, dude, me 5-10 years ago versus me today is like completely different mother. Like these girls, they're like, where were you when we were growing up? You are totally not like how it is. But the thing is, I learned, right? They asked me enough questions. They set enough boundaries. They stopped me in times when I needed to stop them. In the times when I was gaslighting them, they called me on my shit. Enough of those things. The thing is, like, even though I was doing it to my kids, they were already doing these. They were making a plan to stop me. They were protecting themselves. even though I was being toxic to them when they were growing up, I still was able to teach them how to be independent enough to protect themselves. Finally, me, the toxic person, I got the hint. And I said, no, I love my children. I love them with everything that I am. And I want a relationship with them. And I would hate that my behavior is the reason, to know that my behavior is the reason why they don't talk to me or they don't come and see me, or, just things like that. And I said, but I have control over my own behavior. And I can be mad at them and I can make up any excuse on why they wanted to set those boundaries on me. But all I knew was I had control over myself. So I started changing that behavior. I started saying sorry for things. I stopped saying a lot of the slurs or the hurtful things, or asking questions that were kind of prying and really none of my business, right? I became so much more conscious. I raised my level of consciousness in order to have that relationship, because that's an important relationship for me to have. So over the years, I've dropped a lot of really bad behaviors because that relationship with my daughters is primary to me. It's the first and foremost thing outside of my relationship with myself that is of importance to me. And so I made the changes in order to do that. But bringing it back to what I'm talking about today, in your effort to try and make a plan to cut people out of your life, you have to know that you can't change them. That will have to be their own journey, right? Lastly, talk with someone. Talk with a friend, a family member, somebody who you trust, who just be like, just to kind of make sure that you're not going crazy, right? To be like, okay, do you see this behavior or is it just me? Because here's the thing, that's where self-awareness comes through. Self-awareness is the fact that you might feel a certain way, but sometimes it is just you feeling that way. And if it is, then okay, now time to put yourself in check. But if you know someone who maybe sees or is around this person who you consider toxic, just ask them without any type of prejudices, what they see from their outside view looking in. Do they see like that's happening, or are you just, a little crazy? And that's okay. If they say, no way, they're not even doing that to you, and you get multiple people saying that to you, then you know it's you. But if they're like, oh yeah, I see it all the time, I'm glad you brought it up because it makes me feel uncomfortable when I see it happen, right? If that trusted friend or person or family member is agreeing with you, that's just kind of your clue to go ahead and carry on with potentially cutting these ties. Those are things that you can do to make the plan to cut the ties. But then when do you actually cut ties? If and when do you actually do it? Number one, when they don't respect your boundaries. Number two, when they're verbally or physically abusive to you. Number three, when they consistently lie or manipulate you. Or number four, when talking to or even seeing them just causes an emotional reaction in you. These are times when time to make the plan, follow the plan that we set forth, and start to cut ties. But here is the beautiful thing. When you cut ties from your family, it doesn't have to be forever. It can be a temporary thing. I've done that from my parents before, like when either they did something that as an adult I don't agree with and I didn't want my children around, I'd be like, okay, you're not going to see your grandkids. And maybe I said it in the wrong way, but what I meant, and now I can understand better now. I can be like, you know what? You make those choices and I can't stop you from making those choices, or maybe being friends with somebody like that. So if I know that person's there, I'm just not going to come. I'm just not going to come. I'm going to choose that for my family. I'm not going to do that. And I've had to do that. So I've had to pull that card with my parents sometimes and be like, hey, I can't stop you, but I can protect my family in the way I feel that it needs to be protected. So we're not going to come to that event because so-and-so is there, or because that kind of behavior is going to be done there and I don't want to be around it, right? That's totally fine to do that. And eventually they're like, oh, wow, Shan's not coming around, and maybe there's something about what I'm doing that I need to adjust. And it doesn't always work, but it's a great way to just show your boundaries. Now to close, here's the thing. All families struggle from time to time, right? And sometimes we do say toxic things, right? And here's where the issue is. The issue is not that people are toxic sometimes. It's when there's consistency. It's the consistency when they're always doing it in many different facets, or sometimes just one way they're always doing that. That is where you really have to shut it down and you need to start making the plan and also cutting the ties. That's just what you're going to have to do, right? It is a little hurtful. It is a little scary. You will have to go through it alone unless you have like another half with you, but it can be worth it because in the end, this is your journey that you're on. They can't live your journey or your life for you. So you have to live it in a way that you can be at peace to where you can come back and mend that rift or be able to come to a place where there can be a compromise. But if you got to take a break, whether that's for a week, a weekend, a month, a year, or 10 years, do what you got to do. But always have a little bit of an open space to be able to let them back in if maybe they have changed. Like I am just so grateful that my kids allowed me back in after the savage that I was to them as young kids. Like they gave me another chance. How beautiful is that, right? So like I taught them everything right, you know, even though I was doing everything wrong. It's kind of crazy. I'm so happy for it. And just kind of just goes to show how freaking awesome people they are, you know, and that is what my message is to you. I really hope that you can take this and use it to have more peace for your life, right? If that means that you're just thinking about making a plan, or maybe this means that you actually have to start executing a plan. I hope this helps. And I'll probably definitely cover more on this topic a little bit more down the line as well. So thanks for your question. If this helped any of you folks who are tuning in today, go ahead and drop in the comments, maybe a story that you have, or just that it's helped you, right? And share that, because there's a lot of relatability. A lot of us feel alone in these type of things, but we're not. We are not alone. So I will see you folks on the other side. And until then, keep evolving. Bye.